My name is Detective Pierce. I've been on the force long enough to stop believing in coincidences. So when the dispatcher from the 911 center called me at 2 in the morning, her voice shaking, saying there was something wrong with one of the lines, I knew this wasn't going to be a routine case. The 911 communications building sat on the edge of the city, a squat, gray structure surrounded by chain-link fencing and buzzing floodlights. When I arrived, the air felt colder than usual, the kind of chill that doesn't come from weather. Inside, I found the night shift supervisor, Angela Ward. She looked pale, exhausted, like she hadn't blinked in hours. It started at 11:07 p.m., she told me, leading me into the operations room. Line 3 lit up. Operator Matthews answered, and it hasn't disconnected since. Rows of monitors flickered with incoming calls, location data, and waveforms. But one screen stood out, a single, unwavering line that had been active for over 3 hours. No voice. No background noise. Just faint, rhythmic breathing. Angela pressed her headset to her ear. Listen. I did. The sound was steady, slow, and human. A person, breathing right into the line, never speaking, never hanging up. We tried tracing it, she said. The system returns an address, but it's wrong. It points to the old city courthouse. That building had been condemned for 15 years. No electricity. No phone service. No one inside, at least, no one who should be. I requested the call logs. The data looked fine: incoming number, timestamp, signal source. But the caller ID field was blank. Completely empty, as if the system didn't know where the call had come from. Did Matthews say anything before it started? I asked. Angela hesitated. He said he thought he heard something. Not words, just a whisper. I took the headset again. For a moment I thought I could hear it too, the faintest sound beneath the breathing, like someone moving through an empty hallway. Then, a click. Like an old receiver being gently placed back on the hook. But the call didn't end. The timer kept ticking upward. I drove to the courthouse. The streets were empty, fog crawling low across the asphalt. The building stood like a black silhouette against the sky, tall, cracked, every window dark. The front doors were chained shut, but one of the side entrances had been pried open, the padlock snapped clean in half. Inside, my flashlight beam cut through the dust. The silence was absolute, like the place was waiting. The main courtroom still had rows of wooden benches, the judge's stand half collapsed, papers scattered across the floor like debris from another lifetime. I followed the faint echo of dripping water down a corridor and found what used to be the administrative wing. A desk still stood in the corner, and beside it, an old rotary phone. The cord hung loose, not connected to anything. But the receiver was off the hook. I froze. The sound of breathing, faint, slow, steady, filled the air. Not from the room, not from my phone, but from the building itself. Somewhere, deep within the walls, I could hear the echo of a living presence. The call hadn't come from outside. It had started here. The next morning, I returned to the courthouse with a technical team from communications. The city had authorized a full sweep: signal tracing, line mapping, even electromagnetic analysis. Officially, we were investigating an equipment malfunction. Unofficially, we were searching for something that shouldn't exist. The sun didn't reach this part of town anymore. The upper floors of the courthouse were stripped bare, and the marble columns outside were streaked with rust and moss. We had to cut through the padlock again. Someone had reattached it overnight. Inside, the air was heavy and damp. We moved down the main hall, the sound of our boots echoing in the vast, empty space. One of the technicians, a kid named Howard, carried a portable signal receiver. The needle began to move almost immediately. "It's strong," he muttered. "Same frequency as the 911 line." That wasn't possible. The courthouse had been disconnected from the grid since 2008. No power, no network, no phone service. But the signal was alive, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. We reached the old administrative wing, where I'd found the rotary phone. It was still there, dust undisturbed, receiver off the hook, exactly as I'd left it. Howard hooked the analyzer into the base and frowned. "It's active," he said. "But not in a normal way. There's no line voltage. It's broadcasting." "Broadcasting what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Breathing." The others laughed nervously, but when he played the recording back, the sound filled the room, soft, deliberate inhalations, followed by shallow, uneven exhalations. Like someone barely holding on to consciousness. We traced the signal strength deeper into the building. The higher we went, the stronger it became. Each floor was more decayed than the last, walls swollen with moisture, ceiling tiles hanging loose, paint peeling away in ribbons. The courthouse felt wrong. The architecture didn't make sense anymore. Corridors curved where they shouldn't, doors opened into walls, staircases ended abruptly. It was as if the building had been rearranged while no one was watching. At the end of the third-floor hallway, Howard stopped. The receiver's needle hit the maximum. The source was close, right behind a locked door labeled Archives. We forced it open. Inside was a narrow room filled with old case files, metal shelves, and the smell of rot. But in the center of the room, someone had set up a folding chair and a small wooden table. On it, a modern phone headset, plugged into a portable battery pack and a tangled coil of wires that disappeared into the floorboards. "This shouldn't even work," Howard whispered. "There's no power here." The device clicked. And through the speaker, breathing. Steady. Human. I stepped closer. The headset looked brand new. The battery light was on. But the timestamp on the tiny screen read 11:07 p.m., frozen, unmoving. "Angela said the call started at 11:07, I murmured. Howard looked up from his monitor. "Detective, there's something else. The signal's bouncing between multiple origins. This room, the main line, and..." He paused. "Your number." I felt the blood drain from my face. My phone vibrated in my pocket. "Unknown number," I answered. The same breathing, soft, steady, endless. Howard ripped out the cables. The sound didn't stop. The call was still active on my phone. Even after we left the courthouse. Even after the signal dropped. Even after I turned the device off completely. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. The phone sat on the table beside me, battery removed, SIM card out. And still, faintly, impossibly, I could hear it. A whisper. A breath. Right next to my ear. Sleep didn't come that night. I kept my eyes on the ceiling, waiting for the sound to stop. The faint breathing had become part of the silence, not loud, not intrusive, just present. Like it was waiting for me to acknowledge it. At some point, I convinced myself it was imagination, an echo left in my mind after hours of listening to static. But around 3 in the morning, I realized I wasn't imagining it. The sound was moving. It started near the nightstand. Then closer. Like someone was pacing around my apartment, breathing just out of sight. Each inhale carried a subtle rasp, the kind of sound made by someone with damaged lungs or an old wound in the throat. I didn't turn on the light. Some part of me knew that seeing where the sound came from would make it real. In the morning, I brought the phone back to the precinct. The forensic techs couldn't explain it. The internal logs showed a call duration of over 10 hours, from the courthouse's inactive line. Even stranger, every attempt to terminate it failed. Their systems froze when they tried. "It's not possible," one of them said, his voice flat. "There's no active connection." "But the line's still open." They gave up after a while. I didn't. I drove back to the 911 communications center, hoping for answers. Angela met me in the hallway, pale, exhausted, holding a file pressed to her chest. "Matthews didn't come in tonight," she said quietly. "We tried calling him, but his phone rings once, then disconnects." The missing operator. The one who'd taken the original call. We pulled his employee file, traced his last known address. A small apartment complex on the south side, the kind of place you only find when you're looking for something that shouldn't be there. The manager said Matthews had moved out 3 days ago, left no forwarding address, just dropped the key and walked away. But his room was still untouched. The smell of stale coffee and cigarette smoke clung to the air. On the desk, notebooks filled with short phrases, written over and over. "Keep the line open. Don't hang up. It's in the call." I sat down, flipping through pages. His handwriting grew shakier with each entry, as if his hand couldn't keep up with whatever was pushing him to write. The last page was smeared, the words scrawled so hard they tore the paper. "It's listening." That's when I noticed the phone on his nightstand. The same model as mine. The screen was black, battery drained, but when I touched it, the speaker hissed softly, like a voice clearing its throat before speaking. And then I heard it again. That same slow, deliberate breathing. I dropped the phone and stepped back. The sound didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the device anymore. It was coming from the walls. I pressed my ear to the plaster. For a moment, all I heard was my own pulse. Then, a faint tap. Once. Twice. 3 times. Steady. Patterned. Like Morse code. I recognized part of it. /. Alive! Alive. Someone was on the other end of the line. Not a ghost, not a glitch. Someone trapped, sending a message through whatever the call had become. That night, I dreamed of the courthouse, dark halls stretching infinitely, and that same breathing echoing behind every door. When I woke up, my phone was on again, screen glowing faintly, even though the battery had been removed. The call timer was still running. 14 hours 36 minutes and 52 seconds. Still counting. By the next evening, I stopped pretending that sleep would help. The sound had followed me everywhere, not loud, but constant. When I turned on the shower, it echoed through the pipes. When I drove, it came through the car radio, faint, buried beneath static. Always there. Always breathing. I went back to the courthouse. Alone. The fog was thicker this time, curling between the columns like smoke. The door was still broken from our last visit, but someone had nailed the frame shut from the inside. I broke it open again and stepped through. The air smelled like wet stone and something metallic underneath, old blood maybe. Every step echoed through the hall, chasing itself into silence. The light from my flashlight trembled across the cracked walls, and for a moment I thought I saw something move in the reflection, a flicker of motion just behind me. But when I turned, the hallway was empty. The signal analyzer was still in my pocket. When I turned it on, it immediately began to hum, faintly at first, then stronger as I moved deeper. The frequency pulsed like a heartbeat, matching my own steps. It led me down to the sublevels, a place that wasn't on any of the city's blueprints. A door marked, Records Maintenance, had been forced open, the handle twisted and rusted. Behind it, stairs leading into darkness. I descended slowly, the sound of breathing growing louder with every step. At the bottom, my flashlight caught something that made my skin crawl. Rows of phones. Dozens of them. All rotary. All unplugged. Each one resting on a table, their cords neatly coiled, except one. It was off the hook. The receiver lay on the concrete floor, swaying gently as if someone had just set it down. The air was colder here. My breath fogged in the beam of light. And somewhere between the static and the slow, steady breathing, I heard something new. A whisper. Low, almost imperceptible, repeating the same words again and again. Keep the line open. It was the same phrase Matthews had written in his notebook. Over and over. I crouched beside the nearest phone. Its dial plate was cracked, numbers faded, but something had been scratched into the metal. Coordinates. I memorized them before stepping back. And then the breathing stopped. Not faded, stopped. All at once. The silence that followed was heavier than sound. It pressed against my chest, filled the room like invisible smoke. Then, one of the phones rang. The sound shattered the stillness. Old, mechanical, shrill. I didn't answer. None of the others did either. The ringing continued, echoing endlessly through the underground chamber. When I turned to leave, the sound followed me up the stairs. Not echoing, following. Like something crawling through the wires and the walls, searching for a connection. By the time I reached the main floor, the analyzer in my pocket began to vibrate violently. The frequency had spiked. For a brief second, the small display flashed a message. Source transfer complete. Then it died. My phone rang. The screen was blank. No number. The same sound, breathing, quiet, patient, human. But this time, I heard something else in the background. A faint, rhythmic tapping. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats again. Morse code. I wrote it down, one letter at a time. Nim. A. T. T. Matthews. The call was his now. Or maybe it always had been. I hung up. But the sound didn't end. It stayed, not in the phone, not in the air, but in me. A slow, steady breath. Mine. And someone else's. In perfect sync. By the time I returned to the station, the world had started to sound different. Every hum of electricity, every vibration in the walls, every fragment of static on the radio, it all felt connected, like background noise had learned to breathe. I tried to focus on my notes. The coordinates I found in the courthouse pointed to an area near the river, a fenced-off communications relay that had been decommissioned years ago. According to the city's records, it was the original routing hub for emergency lines, where every 911 call once passed through, before the system went digital. I shouldn't have gone there alone. But by then, I already understood something no one else did. The call wasn't coming from a phone. It was traveling through them. The gate to the relay hung open. Wind moved through the metal towers, carrying a low, continuous hum. The control building was small, one room, half collapsed, filled with rusted equipment. And in the center, mounted to the wall, was an old switchboard. Every jack glowed faintly red. And every light was labeled with a name. I stepped closer. Some of the tags had faded, others still legible. Matthews. Ward. And at the bottom, Pierce. That wasn't possible. The red bulb beside my name was on. The air began to pulse. Not physically, but perceptibly, a rhythmic expansion and contraction, like the room itself was breathing. The same frequency as before. The same steady, patient inhale. Then the switchboard came to life. Every phone line crackled at once, all channels opening simultaneously. I heard voices, fragments, overlapping, pleading, whispering. Some familiar. Some not. Matthew's voice was buried among them. "Don't hang up," he said. "If you hang up, it needs another line." The lights flickered. For a second, I saw my reflection in the glass panel, pale, exhausted, headset around my neck. But there was something wrong. My reflection was breathing when I wasn't. I yanked the cables from the wall. Sparks flew. The sound didn't stop. I tore the wires free, kicked the switchboard down, but the breathing only grew louder. It wasn't coming from the machines anymore. It was coming from everywhere. "Pierce," the voice said. "Calm, even." "You answered." That's all it ever needed. The air pressure changed, like a storm pressing inward. I stumbled outside, gasping, but the sound followed. It wasn't in the building. It wasn't in the phone. It was in me. They found me the next morning, sitting on the curb outside the relay. No damage, no sign of forced entry. Just a broken switchboard and a phone receiver lying beside me. I told them the truth, that the call was still active, that it never disconnected, that Matthews wasn't missing, he was transferred. They said the building had no power for years. That the lines were dead. That there was no way for a signal to exist. They wrote the report. Filed it under equipment anomaly. And that was that. But I still hear it. Sometimes in the hum of the refrigerator. Sometimes in the static between stations on the radio. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is silent, and I'm sure the line's gone dead. Then, faintly. Inhale. Exhale. And a whisper, just for me. "Keep the line open."